I want to talk to you about what it's like being a mother of a soldier.
What's weird is that you asked that question and there are no tissues here. So
there is right beside you, sweetheart, on the other side. Bring them over.
For me, like micro, like if I'm in this moment, what am I doing in this moment? Not in this national level or this global level, but like in this very, very small and intimate way, how can I affect change right there? I think I was asking him, not rhetorically, but like, what do I do now? Like, what do I do? It's like 9 or 10 in the morning. We'd finished the Azakot. Simchas Torah had effectively ended for everybody. It was just this race of like going to the hospital, going to funerals, going to shivas, trying to talk to your kid, trying to understand what was happening. Where was he emotionally? Was he
okay?
Where
were you emotionally? Hi, and welcome to the Dayna Show, where we discuss in English day-to-day life of Israeli citizens, our concerns and aspirations for the country, and everything in between. I'm your host, Dayna Kaplan, and we're so glad that you could join us. The beginning of the podcast, I always mention the hostages, and we still have 59 hostages still in Gaza. Who knows if they're alive or not? There's been some Od Chaim from them, but I like to say that every single day that goes by, they're in my thoughts. And on that note, I also pray for the Chayalim that are protecting us to come home safely, and that the war should be over, and we should have a Yeshua and a Geula in this country.
I think that the hostages are front and center, but I think you and I have the language of having had kids in the army at that time, and sort of that dichotomy of like what it means to have people who are actually powerless and to have people who are fighting a good fight, and where your thoughts go. That's where I'm at.
Yeah. We're going to explore all of those things. And I'd like to introduce you, and I hope that I don't get this wrong, because you have so many different titles and you were involved in so many different things.
I just start with B'nai Torah.
B'nai Torah. Well, we're both originally from Toronto.
We are.
Yeah, you moved to Israel, but first you got your master's in social work.
I did. Wow, you really did homework.
No, of course. You did a lot of writing, editing, curriculum work for Moshava, Young Judea, lots of different things. You are a writer for Substack. You have
I have a little Substack thing that every once in a while, when I feel like I need to put everything down, I think it was sort of my answer to like, I had a really hard time with social media after the 7th, because before, like, I would credit it with like, it built our business for us. It's such a happy space for me. Everything that we had been working on was very visual. And after the 7th, I pulled back and I wasn't sure, and I want to write, and I love telling a great story, and there are great stories to tell. You're an amazing writer. I just didn't know what to do. So like, I tossed a few things on Substack. I think about it. It's there.
You're a phenomenal writer.
That's really nice.
You're so genuine, and so it's like you really speak to so many of us. Besides that, you started the Chalakram's site, which is adorable.
It is adorable. Know? It's definitely defunct. I mean, I think it exists still, but
it does. I checked it up.
Thanks, man.
It does. It does.
Look, I had started it when the kids were little, and it sort of answered that need for me at that time of like, you sort of like when your kids are young and you're on autopilot with them, even though now, like, what would you give to go back to those days?
For sure.
But at the time, it felt like, where does my creativity go? I was like, well, we could do, like crafts or recipes or things to do at the Shabbat table. But I have this very clear memory of saying to my kids when they would come home from Gan, oh, I don't have time for you right now. I'm telling somebody else's mom how to make, popsicle stick art or something. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, you started Pat B'Melech. You guys opened up Pat B'Melech.
We did.
An amazing cafe that was in the Gush. And now you are involved with Meshek 48. You have this amazing space where you have workshops and lectures and Iruim. Different people celebrate their.
I think that Pat B'Melech for us was this I don't even know how to explain it. Like, it's been 3 years. We sold the company. We stayed on for a bit longer. And then at a certain point, we sort of turned to each other. Dave and I were like, this isn't really fun anymore. We didn't understand corporate well, and we didn't care. Like, those things, I don't know. I'm bad at that part. I don't care about business in that way. I just love people. And so when it became less about people, I was like, I didn't care about bread, meaning David makes really, really good bread. I was really happy. But that was always like...
1 second, Devorah. I have to say that even though I live in Modi'in and you guys were in the Gush, I did come out to visit, and I ordered delivery when you had those spelpitas every week. They didn't make it past an hour. Like I would get, I don't know, they pack like 12 or whatever. And I'm like, oh, they're healthy. They're spelt. So healthy. And I ate them all in 1 second. They were delicious.
Listen, that was another, like, you know what? We were sort of like plodding along there, and we had started small and we'd gotten bigger and bigger. And then COVID hit and we were like what do we, like, what happens now? Like, what do we do? And I'm really, really all about the hustle, probably until October 7th. I was really all about the hustle. And I was like, okay. And I called another Torontonian, Aviva Fink, who has a website company. I said, just quote me the price of what it'll take for your team to work through Pesach. So that when Pesach ends, I have like 5 different websites for 5 different days of delivery around the country. Like, we just wanted to keep as many people with like employed as we could.
I wanted to start off from the beginning because you and I both grew up in Toronto. We're part of the same Jewish community, went to the same synagogue, went to the same camps, went to the same schools. We really had a very similar upbringing. And I mentioned this before, but preparing for this episode really brought me back. It brought back a lot of memories that I haven't even thought of in a long time. It was very emotional because I started to think about my father, who's since passed away.
Who was a very significant piece of Toronto. Like,
yes.
I mean, as your father, which is very, very different, but like he was a part of the fabric of what we grew up with.
Yeah. And our parents really were there at the beginning of B'nai Torah, of our shul. You know, like they were there from almost the beginning, and they founded this institution where it was a lot of Torah, a lot of talk about moving to Israel. And I wanted to ask you, why do you think it was so important for our parents to put us in like a Zionistic format, like that we would have a Zionistic education? Do you think they had foresight of what was going to happen in the future?
I don't know that there were other options. I'm not sure, meaning my family ended up settling here with the exception of my brother and his family who are in LA. But we were also only one generation in Toronto. My parents moved from New York. And I actually think that when we reflect on it, there was a little bit of an immigrant experience that we had. I think that Toronto had people who had were almost dynastic, like generations upon generations. And we didn't have that. But we did have this feeling in Toronto of like, there was this almost like almost counterculture, right? I think that we grew up in Eitz Chaim. Eitz Chaim wanted us to, which was a fairly right-wing religious school, that the feeders, they wanted us to feed us into Beis Yaakov. And I think they were very disappointed when, you know, many of us went to Opana, to the B'nai Akiva school. So I think that there was a part of us pushing the envelope a little bit. And I wonder if B'nai Torah allowed that to happen also. I remember my father setting up like Shavuot learning for kids.
Do you know that I was the first kid who stayed up all night on Shavuot? I went with my dad to shul when there was no other children. They had no youth programs at the time.
Wow.
Okay. It was probably like in 2nd grade or something. I was really, really young. And I was obsessed with my dad because he wasn't home a lot. So I wanted to go with him wherever he was. And I would go with him on Shavuot. And parents used to see me there and they're like, you know, they're going to bring their kids. And after a couple of years, there was a lot of youth that started going. And so they started these programs.
So it was the first Dayna show.
Possibly.
Yeah, look, I do remember that, like, I remember my dad being very involved with, like, the youth of B'nai Torah. I remember that, like, the youth minion, I guess, like, David Wolf ran the youth minion or something, but there was that. But I think that you and I were the generation in B'nai Torah of, like, all the kids were our age. Like, it was the fun, that's the shul that everybody walked to from around Toronto. And I think that lasted for a few years, and then it moved up to the Bayit. And then I think, like, B'nai Torah, I don't think has such a large population anymore. No. But we were there in its
Most
heyday.
of the people moved here.
Yeah.
So they kind of did something right. Aren't you grateful for the education that we had?
I wonder.
Do you think it had an effect on you making Aliyah?
I don't know. Meaning, I would say this. When I grew up, like, we were very B'nai Akiva family. Do you know what I mean? My parents, we couldn't afford to go to Mosheva, so my parents worked at Mosheva, so we could go for a couple of years. We spent my junior year of high school, we were actually in Israel. My parents took a sabbatical. And I think that probably sealed it for me and for my sister that we were definitely coming back. And then I guess Opana did. It's funny that I don't think about B'nai Torah as a Zionist shul, but when you reflect back, so many people are here from that shul.
Why do you think that is?
I never really thought about it. I really didn't, but I think maybe part of it is, I guess it was like that perfect storm. Opana was certainly pushing you towards that. All the shlichim that they had there, camp was pushing you towards it, B'nai Akiva was pushing you towards it. I guess it really was part of the language. You weren't doing something unusual if you moved to Israel. Like, it sort of felt natural.
I've said this on previous episodes, but when I was growing up, I never thought my future would be in Toronto. I always knew that I was going to move here. It was my dream, and I knew it was going to happen one way or another.
I actually have heard you say that on the podcast, and I was actually interested because I don't think your whole class moved here.
Nope, but a lot. Even in Opana, we had like a more Ashkenaz side and a more Sephardic side. Most of the Sephardim moved here too, from my class. And I don't know exactly what it was. I think maybe we had some really good teachers who presented Israel to us in a very positive way. But I look back at all the different educational facilities, camps, things that I was involved in, or that I was immersed in my youth. They all played an integral role. I think Mosheva as well. It was like, we would wear the white shirt and the blue pants, and we would sing Hatikva, and it was really instrumental, I think, in the fiber of our youth, that Israel was an option. I don't know what it is that made, me go as opposed to other people that I know who stayed, but I'm definitely grateful, especially now. I'm super grateful that I live here.
There's no question about now being like, I can't imagine where else I would be able to be. And it's interesting to talk to friends of ours who are in the States and in Canada and listen to what their interaction and reaction is. And ultimately, I feel like everybody has to live their best life and where they need to be. I'm not a proselytizing Zionist. Everybody be where they want to be. But I couldn't imagine any other constellation than being here.
When I think of what's going on in Toronto now, with all of the anti-Semitism there, where my dad's store was in Thornhill, they had several stores vandalized there.
I just heard that recently.
Recently. And I'm worried. I'm worried about them.
Do you have family still in Toronto?
Yeah, I do. My mom's sisters live in Toronto. My dad has we have nieces and nephews that live in New York and in Toronto. But I think about like how lucky I am that I'm here, that I don't have to make the move, and I feel I'm nervous for them that they're going to have to leave, not because they want to, because they have to.
It's not something that occupies my thoughts. I don't know why. No, it's not. I feel like, I don't know. It's not. I think that at a certain point you realize that you have, I always tell this to my kids, like you have an amount of emotional energy you can expend. And so you're going to choose where to expend that energy. And I feel like for people who are living in other places and will make that decision either to come or not come, I agree that it's probably more difficult to pick up your life at this stage, but it's what works for them.
I think that were your grandparents in the Holocaust?
It's so fascinating. The short answer is no. Like my family was a very, very New York family. So I've just been doing like little ancestry.com, my little like nerdy pastime. And so as we go further and further up, like my grandfather fought for the Americans in World War II. And David's family definitely went through the Holocaust. His father got out on a kinder transport. So there's this sort of like this weird separation of, I think that recently we realized that like our great grandparents, maybe one was in Treblinka. But beyond that, there was never a discussion of Holocaust because all four of my grandparents, I had one grandfather who came over at 7 or 8. Everybody else was born in New York and lived that like very, very rich, like Lower East Side, Williamsburg, Brooklyn life.
I think maybe because my grandparents were survivors,
It's a different
I've always
narrative.
had this like trauma gene from them. And I think that's part of the reason why I'm nervous about the Jewish community in Toronto, because I see the escalation of anti-Semitism and I want to like just grab them and bring them here. I feel much safer here than I do in any other place in the world right now, as a Jew.
As a Jew, I have to say, like, I did not sleep well in those first many months of the war.
Yeah.
I still probably don't sleep well, but there were nights that, especially when my son was in Aza and we knew that it wasn't good, that I would just be up all night. And there was this one TV show that I could watch. It was called Maine Cabin Masters. I'm plugging it, everybody.
Okay.
Go check it out because nothing happens on it. It's like...
So how about my daughters as Gilmore Girls? That's what we do.
No, because that has plot. Like you could cry in Gilmore Girls. No, I don't want plot. I don't want to have to be nervous. I don't want to have to. No. They take this cabin somewhere in Maine. That's like, it's not like they're turning it into $1 million. No. It's a Pushit cabin. It feels like a bunk from Ennismore. Do you know what I'm saying? Like with that creaky screen door. And these guys with these great Maine or Boston accents show up and they turn it a little nicer. And that's the whole show. And
Perfect.
I could just watch that hour after hour. So maybe like if I'm not here, maybe I'll be in Maine in a cabin. But no, you can't. Also, you and I, once our kids are here and going through that experience, like we're done. This is it. You know what I mean?
I would be devastated if my kids left. After all that I've invested in this country, I would be devastated. They don't have any intention of leaving, but I want my kids to be close to me all the time, especially after, October 7th. And I really want to get into that with you, but I want to talk about first making Aliyah. And I want to talk about that tvach of time, that range of time, the first year that you made Aliyah. How was that for you?
No, it's hilarious fun. I was still it was hilarious fun. I mean, look, I was single. I was finishing grad school. So I had an internship here for social work. So I was like living in Jerusalem with all like the single people and you had your little Shabbat meals and everybody like dated everybody and it was like nice and cute and fun. And it didn't hold weight. There wasn't something scary about it. There's something that was just lovely and fun about it. So my Aliyah didn't feel like it was this big, monumental experience because I was a kid. I was like 21, 22. You know what I mean? So it was fun. It didn't feel scary. It really just felt like an extension of summer camp. Also, the people that I had surrounded myself with for years, first of all, because I'd been here in 11th grade, so I had all of those friends. And then you come for your year after high school, and I had all of those friends. And then summer camps, and like it was just,
So it wasn't like a huge adjustment for you.
No.
My Aliyah experience is very different.
When did you come?
I moved here in 1997 in February, and I moved to Ra'anana. Straight to Ra'anana, which I wasn't so fond of. It was too Anglo for me, and I really wanted to have an Israeli experience. But it was really hard because I didn't have a lot of friends there. When I went to the supermarket, even though we had a really good background of Hebrew, it was hard for me to communicate with Israelis, and I had to step up to the plate. Nobody spoke English. So it was very isolating in the beginning. Until my son was born, I felt really, really lonely. It was really hard. But I came here knowing that I was going to make it work no matter what. I had it wasn't like failure was not an option for me.
It wasn't even a thought of there would be something else.
Yeah. It was like, this is, I'm going to plug through this. And like I've said before, my grandparents after the Holocaust, they were refugees, they immigrants. I felt that way too. I'm like, I know that this is going to be a challenge for me. It's a different culture, but I'm willing to do the work to put my roots down here for the future generations. And that's the way I still feel about it now. I'm like, I know that it was difficult for me, but for my kids, in a certain respect, it's easier. Being born here is easier.
It is definitely easier. I do feel like my kids have more to prove as children of immigrants, even though we're in a community that's full of immigrants. You know what I'm saying? We're not in some isolated community. Alone Shvut is, 35% Anglo. But I think that our kids, my kids, like they felt like they needed to prove something a little bit more. I felt it very strongly, like during the war. Like our son that was at that time in Sadir was in an elite unit. And I was like, we did that because the conversations that we had at our table or what we were proud of, or a kid that wants to prove himself. And I was like, I wonder if you're not a kid of an immigrant and if you're confident in this country, you're like, maybe I could do something a little bit quieter.
You know what I find really fascinating? A lot of our kids really wanted to get into combat units, elite combat units. Yeah. And a lot of those kids are the ones who were killed.
Yeah.
What do you have to say about that?
So I'll tell you a story. I have one girl and then I have 4 boys. And so my oldest boy was the one that was in the Army on the 7th, and he's in this elite unit. And my next 2 boys have hearing loss. And they were diagnosed on the same day, many years ago, my birthday. That wasn't a good part of my birthday. And I remember crying on the way home from Ra'anana, where they were diagnosed. And I remember calling my friend, and I remember the 2 things that I was upset about. He was a doctor. I said, listen, so nerdy and wonderful. 1, I'm devastated that my boys won't be able to be in combat. And 2, I'm devastated that when the Beis HaMikdash is built, Kohanim can't be deaf if they want to serve in the Beis HaMikdash. Who knew that Eitz Chaim lived so strong within me? And I was so upset. And to his credit, even though he doesn't remember this at all, he said to me, listen, what they're talking about in the Torah, it's full deafness. What your boys have, it's fine. They'll be in the Beis HaMikdash. And I was like, okay, I'll be okay.
Right. Is your husband's a Kohen,
he's a Kohen. I'm like, listen, guys, let's go. And now my next one is in the Army, and he can't be combat. And he fought every which way to get as close to combat as possible. And so he is a tomech lechima, like he's a support staff, also in a combat unit, but I sleep at night, But yeah.
First of all, when did you move to the Gush? At what point?
We got married in 98, and we moved there because David was studying in yeshiva and rabbi school, and, it's cheap housing. And I was like, I think I can probably last in the Gush for a year. Like, that's not going to be my speed. It's not going to be my vibe. I'll give you a year. And it's been 26 years. That was it.
What do you like the most about living there?
Oh my goodness. When you talk about Gilmore Girls, like, I feel like we live in Stars Hollow. Like, I do. Like, my kids know, like, you just drive down the street and you're just waving because you know everybody, or that's your kid. Or I remember at some point, one of my kids got lost on a Shabbat and someone just brought him home and they're like, oh, he looked like a cat. Like, that's it. I love the small townness of it. I love it. I love just last week, Yom HaShoah, they did, the tekes was like the Noar, like the younger kids, and then the older generation. I love how it works. I love the rhythm of that life.
It is really beautiful. My sister also lives in that area, and it's like such a strong community. The kids are out on the street riding their bicycles. And you would think, like, when I went last year to interview Sherry Mendel in Tekoa, and I was really nervous driving around there, but she says that she feels perfectly safe. On that visit also, we stopped by the cemetery, and that was traumatizing for me to see the amount of fresh graves of children there. You guys have sustained a lot of sorrow.
Last night, there were 2 boys killed over Shabbat, and last night we realized that one of them is from El-Azhar, is from my son's high school. Like, it's a lot. I would also say David and I consciously in this small town, but we really chose to live a big life. Like, I feel like in our community, like, you can adopt a shevet of Bnei Akiva, like once they turn 16 and they're not there so much anymore. So we've done it twice where 30 or 40 kids pile into our house every Friday night for 5-6 years. And it's been beautiful, but we've lost kids from each shevet. And that's been really, really tough for us. There are people that we've been really close to in our son and Yoni's unit. Like, we're very close to the guys in his unit. I think there's probably no better job you can have when your kid's in the Army than owning a restaurant.
For sure.
Because then you're just like, come on over, you know? And that's been great. But watching the losses there, it's been really hard. And I've sort of wondered the cost that you have of living this very large life where maybe you'd be more protected if your life was a little smaller.
Well, you're benefiting the entire community. You're like sending a huge hug to everybody there. It's like I said in the beginning, you can't change what has happened, but you can be there as a support unit for everyone, and that's what you're doing.
Look, we had already left Papa Melech before the 7th had happened, and we'd already started at the Meshek. And Papa Melech had served, like, I'd realized early on that a vehicle for tzedakah, like, there's nothing better than a bakery or restaurant that has food left at the end of the day. Because once a week we were giving to single mothers, and once a week we were bringing to Pina Chama, a place that serves soldiers. And, you know, you knew who in the community just needed a little extra love, who was going through treatments, who was going through a divorce, who was going through whatever it was. You just had that ability to be there with something concrete. Because I think often, like, we want to help. Everybody has best of intentions, and we're not sure how. And so there's nothing like just putting a loaf of bread by somebody's door, you know, to talk to them or engage. It was really, really beautiful, and it was unexpected. I didn't realize, first of all, how much I'd love that, and also how simple it is to really give. And after the 7th, we were at a point at the Meshek where we were about to, it was much smaller, meaning Papa Melech had, I don't know, 50 workers or something, and we were like 3. And we had just finished this great sevev of workshops all through Sukkot. And we were finalizing the menu to launch like a fuller menu at our cafe. And the 7th happened, and I said, yeah, I'm done. You have to smile a lot when you're in that world. You have to be on all the time. And I was like, I got to curl up into a bed. Like, I can't. And the day later, they stationed 80 soldiers. Like, if this is us, then it's like right next door, there was like the Chadar Ochel of the kibbutz, which now is the event hall. And they put 80 guys in there, assuming that the Gush was probably the next hot spot. And I was like, listen, if I'm going to go bankrupt, I might as well do it in style. And I was like, we'll be open for them. And my daughter and I, who weren't sleeping, and I hadn't discovered Maine cabin masters yet, to be honest. So we were like, show up at midnight, and we turn on the coffee machine, and we would just make them coffees, and they'd be going out on missions at 4 a.m. So we'd be there at 8 when they got back, and we were just emptying out our freezers of whatever we had. And then, like, people just started coming. Donations started coming. People started coming to cook once a week for the soldiers. We'd leave our keys for them on Shabbat. And I was like, bishvil zeh, like, I get it. Like, I'm here for this. And when they go, then I'll stop, you know? And it was this, like, they knew about my son. They were part of his unit. They were older guys in his unit, and they could tell me more. Like, I think at that time, Yoni was very quiet. And I was like, that crazy person in the movies that has like those index cards on a wall and like is figuring out what moment, what happened, where, how. And they could talk about it with me. And it felt like the guy that a week earlier was protesting Bibi with all of his might is sitting there, or the guy who had moved to Switzerland, who opened up a pop-up hummus truck on weekends in Switzerland. He came back, and some guy from New York, and the guys one guy got married in the middle and came for Shav Bracho. One guy had a baby and they did a bris. Like, it was just this microcosm. And I felt like Rosh Tzurim, where we are, is like tucked into this little corner of the world. And I was like, just let me stay here. Like, let me be king of this castle. And that was it. That was all I needed.
I want to talk to you about what it's like being a mother of a soldier.
What's weird is that you ask that question and there are no tissues here. So
there is right beside you, sweetheart, on the other side. Bring them over.
Oh, they should be sponsoring you. Guys, sponsor the podcast.
When I obviously know what my experience was on October 7th, but I have to tell you that I went through a wide range of emotions. Now I can look back and say that I'm really happy being here, but I definitely feel like I had this element of guilt because I had my youngest was in Sadir, also in Azad. My oldest went to Lebanon right away, and I had no contact with them for 2 weeks. And I think I had a full-blown mental breakdown when they left. And you have a very interesting story. And I've read about, a lot of what you're a beautiful writer and you wrote so eloquently about your experience. Do you want to fill us in about that time?
I have to tell you what I always feel this way, which is it's not my story. So on the one hand, I feel
but I want to know totally from Devorah's point of view.
Also, when my kids listen to this podcast, I just want them to hear how real Canadians say Devorah, because they don't get it.
No,
you know what I mean?
Or they say Devorah.
No, or I live in America, you're Devorah or whatever, but that great Canadian accent of Devorah.
I want to hear the mom Devorah perspective of what happened. What happened to you?
The mom perspective goes like this. We had friends with us for Sukkot, Daphne and David, who we usually have in our house at some point.
Do they come here often?
They do.
Okay.
So they're on their way. But yes, meaning they just left. Like we were with them for Pesach. You know what I'm saying? It's just fine.
You don't follow.
October 7th in the morning, I get a text. I guess as a coat were going on. I don't even remember what it was. I know that Yoni sent me a text that said, something's going on. He was on base for Simchat Torah.
Where was his base?
His base is outside Malay Adumim. She says, something's going on. We're going south. I said, I have no problem texting my kid on Shabbat or holidays or pretty much any time. When he's in the army, of course. So I write back to him right away. We love you. Stay safe, or whatever it is you say in that moment. And then at about 9, he said, we got here, we're going in. And then that was it. So now we know that his unit was one of the first into Kfar Aza, and we know that they sustained a number of losses. They had 2 Chaylim who were killed right away. It also feels right on the precipice of Yom HaZikaron to be having this conversation and be saying people's names. It feels like I'm never not in Yom HaZikaron mode, but it feels like almost a directive. So Amir Fisher, who was one of Yoni's best friends, was killed right away. Ben Bernstein, who was, I don't know any leadership position titles, maybe Mafkats, someone will correct me, was killed right away. And Yona Brief was injured, and he has since passed away. And 3 other boys were injured as well. And we didn't know any of that. And at some point, I walked down from Toronto many years ago. There was a shaliach named Rav Whiteman. Do you remember him? Mm-hmm. So he was the shaliach of Bnei Kiva when I was running Bnei Kiva of Toronto. So I was close with him, and I was close with his wife, and he lives in Alon Shvud, and I'm close to him there. And he had actually, unbeknownst to me, had just finished lecturing prolifically about 50 years since Yom Kippur War, because he has an unbelievable story about the Yom Kippur War that he was in. And I walked down to him with David, and I said to him, I think I was asking him, not rhetorically, but what do I do now? What do I do? It's 9 or 10 in the morning. We'd finished the Azakot. Simchas Torah had effectively ended for everybody. Maybe I wanted him to say, you could be on your phone. Or maybe I wanted him to say, it'll be okay. I don't know. And he talked to me about his story a little bit, and I cried a little bit. And we walked back up to the house, and we just sort of waited. And after Chag, a number of hours after Chag, Yoni wrote to say, we're out, everybody's okay. And that was all I heard. But also, I forgot that he's a complete liar, meaning that's just a total lie. You're just full of garbage. That's not true at all. And at about 6:45 in the morning, another mom from the unit called me, hysterical, saying to me that Fisher had been killed. And Fisher was somebody that we were close to. Meaning his family he was born in Israel, but the family lived in Ghana for many years. And he decided on his own to come back and do the Army. And he started in Sheldog, and then he fell to their unit. And it was a love affair, meaning the guys in the unit loved him. They used to call him Hachayal Boded, Hachilo Boded. And he had been at our house many times. He'd been there for Shabbat meals. It was someone that we knew well. And I just couldn't understand what she was saying. Like I couldn't. And in the end, we got in the car, my daughter and I, Yael and I, and we just drove to the Fisher's apartment. They had been in Cyprus, and they realized something was going on, and they managed to fly in. They got here at 1 a.m, got to their apartment at 1, and at 3 a.m, they were notified. And then by 10:30 in the morning, we were there. They don't know who we are, but I'm Yoni Katz's mom, and that was it. And so that week was a series of... The truth is that Yonah Brief's parents were in Chicago at the time, visiting his family. So I was in touch with Hazel at that time also. And it was just this race of like going to the hospital, going to funerals, going to Shivas, trying to talk to your kid, trying to understand what was happening. Where was he emotionally? Was he
Where
okay?
were you emotionally? What do you remember how you were feeling, or was it just autopilot?
There was an element of autopilot. There was an element of I'm so immensely proud of this kid. And I can't believe that his life and this life has just ostensibly ended for everyone, because there's pre the 7th and post the 7th. So like I have this very crystal clear memory of Yoni had written the eulogy for Fisher, and they couldn't get out. There was no way they were going to get out. And so we all went, and anybody that could go from Yoni's friend group who wasn't in the army with them, they went. And we were all there. And as we drove home, he called us, like a WhatsApp group call. And he said, I want to read you my eulogy. And he'd put all of his best friends on the call and us on the call. And he said, I want you all to mute because I don't want to hear anybody crying. And he read this eulogy that was like you think that I write well, like nothing. It was just music, poetry. It was so beautiful. And he read it and we all got off the call. And I remember that David and Yael were in the car and me, and none of us could say another word for the hour-and-a-half drive home.
Oh, wow.
Like there was nothing to say. And it felt like that story I can repeat in any one of a million different scenarios that have happened since. Like this idea of people stepping up in unexpected and beautiful ways and painful ways. I don't know. It was, you broke. You just broke.
There was like an innocence that was like destroyed on that day. I don't know if you felt this way, but when my oldest was in the army in Sadir, and it was about 10 years ago, like the way I looked at it was, I never thought that there was going to be an actual war. I kind of was like, I'm just going to wait for the 3.5 years, whatever, to go by. And like, you kind of just like, plug your nose and just go dive in, and you're like, hope that it just passes by as fast as possible. And I don't know, I don't think I ever thought that our kids were going to be fighting in a war. I kind of had this like illusion that, the army was important and that everyone has to go through it. But we're not going to really need to use it. They're not really going to fight. And I think that after the 7th, I think our eyes were just open. Like the reason we have this army is because we need it. And they're there to protect us. And our children are the ones who are doing it.
I think for me, a big part was that last sentence. I think because Yoni was in the unit he was in, I knew that they were active and I knew that they were doing things all along. But it also felt isolated, like you had a mifza, like you went on an operation and there was sort of like a beginning and an end, and then you came home for the weekend and you did your laundry and you went out with your friends and you sort of continued your life. like my kids would never understand when we traveled to the States and you would see an American soldier and people get emotional, including me. And they're like, why emotional? Like you have soldiers everywhere. And I'm like, in Israel, you come home and do your laundry at home. Like these guys, like they're home for years, there was such a difference. And so there was that feeling of like, I have a little bit of like a control, like type A personality, maybe. So I would always feel like I got it. You know what I mean? Like I got it. I have a great relationship with my kids most of the time. I love them very much most of the time. Do you know what I'm saying? Like it's good and it's real and it's tough and it's exactly what it's supposed to be. And I felt like, okay, we're going to figure this out. And then something like this happens. You're like, oh, no, we don't figure this out. Like there isn't something that happens here that I get to control in any way that can help. There's nothing. There's no safety net. There's no what to expect when you're expecting.
Completely vulnerable.
And worse than that, like I can feel completely vulnerable and it's about me. But when it's about my kids, I can't, like, there's something that's so off-putting that you sort of have to like recalibrate. Like, I don't know how to do this right. And I know that my kids need me to do something. It was very recently, like within the past 6 months, I said to all of my other kids, remind me where you were on the 7th. Like, were you home? Were you not? Like, nothing. Meaning, I knew that Eitan was in yeshiva in Mechina up north. But like David and Daphne had to remind me that like they went and got him. Like he managed to get down to Yerushalayim. They got him. I think David and Daphne, who were with us, I think they must have cooked and done laundry for 2 weeks straight because there was no constellation where like I was functioning. Like there was none of that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I remember dropping off my son in Yerushalayim on Shabbat. I was working in Mada and I came home that morning. I got home. I was on a shift during the Azakot. I came home. I got home around 10 and Benny got a message that he has to be at the bus stop in Yerushalayim in 15 minutes. And I'm like, tell him today's not a good day. Like, I can't.
Doesn't work for me.
Doesn't work. Tomorrow I just finished the night shift. I'm not driving to Yerushalayim now. And he's like, Mom, we got to go right now. And like he packed up in like 2 minutes and I shot to Yerushalayim. I don't think I ever drove that quickly, and I dropped him off. That was probably one of the worst days of my life, dropping him off there. I didn't know if I was ever going to see him again. And I feel like it's a little insensitive for me to say that because he's alive and there's so many boys who didn't come back,
I think that it's life, meaning there are so many like, look, I went down to Kfar Aza with Yoni. I'd asked him, like at a certain point, like he went down with Ben's family and with Fisher's family and he walked them through. And like,
at what point was this?
For him, for those families, I think it was pretty early on. As early as it could be safely. And also like Yoni had a story and the story was being told and it was on TV and it's in a book and there were interview requests and that's not what he was doing. But because there was a story and the story was out there and I had my imaginary board where I was trying to figure out where they were at 9:32 and 10:04, at a certain point I said, I think I want to see it. And in addition to what he was doing, Yael, my daughter, who was in college at the time, everything obviously stopped, and she had been working for Yad Ben Tzvi. And so what they got the tekken from the government to go down to the Otev and to start archiving and, I don't know the word in English, like to...
what's the word?
It's to like lishmor, like it's to digitize. Well, they aren't digitizing it, but they're archiving and setting aside things from every home in the Otev, so that when the kibbutz is ready to tell their story, they tell their story. So Yael is driving down at like 5 a.m. at times when no one is getting into the Otev, and like walking and crawling through homes that have had only the worst imaginable stuff happening. Cataloging. Thank you. Cataloging. And so she had been doing that for months. And she actually even ended up cataloging the house that Yoni was in on the 7th. And the way that this is the smallest country in the whole world is that some guy walks into the house and he says, oh, this is my mom's house. I was here on the 7th. And Yael says, oh, my brother was here on the 7th. And he says, well, who's your brother? And she said, Yoni. Ma, at the hotel Yoni Katz? Mm-hmm. He's like, we got to take a selfie. And that was it. She's sending him a selfie from outside the house. And like, so meaning we went down with Yoni and Yael, and he walked us through what it was. And she walked us through a bit of what it was. And I turned to David and I was like, there's nothing that we will accomplish in our lives ever, ever that will touch the accomplishments of our children. There's nothing.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. They showed such enormous maturity and strength, and they're heroes. They're absolute heroes.
They're heroes who, at least mine, like, are desperate to not be heroes. It's literally the last thing on their list of what they would ever want to be. Like, it's not about that.
And I think that if we asked them if they would do it again, I think they would say yes.
They would say yes. Meaning, look, Yoni's unit, they had to repopulate before they could go anywhere and do anything. And they were desperate to get into Aza, desperate. And all the parents, we were all like, enough, Halas, you did. It's okay. No, you just got to keep going. You got to feel like there's meaning behind what you're doing.
Do you feel comfortable talking about what Yoni went through now that you know his story a little bit?
I think that it's complicated, right? I think that they came under attack really quickly when they got in. And part of coming under attack, they moved people who had been injured or who had been killed into a home, not realizing that there was a family in that house. And once they realized there was a family in that house, in the mamad, Yoni and one other guy were in touch with the people in the mamad. And we've since met them many, many times. We love them. We could not be more different. They would say the same about us. And we love them. And there was a 16-year-old girl, like the woman named Leora, and her granddaughter was in the house. And the granddaughter took Yoni's phone and added him to the WhatsApp group of the kibbutz. And so Yoni was in touch with people throughout until more army presence came and things were divided up. But his WhatsApps are pretty intense.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you ever have the feeling that you regret moving here?
No.
Even with everything that's happened?
Isn't that wild? No.
Did you ever feel guilty?
I don't think it's guilt, but I think that there's this moment, like my kids grew up, we went to Mosheva for a bunch of years working. Our kids grew up in Stone. Yoni definitely grew up in Stone. And every once in a while, I'll be in touch with one of his friends, or he'll be in touch with one of his friends who's working in some financial institution as a consultant after graduating from SciSim School of Business. And I'm like, wow, that's a road not taken. I don't feel bad. No.
I think at the beginning of the war, I did have a little bit of a guilty feeling. I started to get into this little crisis of, if I didn't make Aliyah, then my sons wouldn't be on the front lines right now,
I'm not sure why I don't think like that. I'm not sure, because all you want is for
to protect your kids.
Yeah. And we didn't, meaning as a country, we didn't. As an army, we didn't. As parents, we couldn't. I think one of the most gracious thing and the most beautiful thing about the people in Kfar Aza, I don't want to generalize, but certainly the ones that we've met, is they have so much right to have so much bikoret. And I think they probably do have bikoret on the government, criticism of the government or of the army. But they'll say to the boys, but we love you. You saved our lives. And they've invited us a number of times. They put on an exhibition. They were all relocated to Shvaim. So there was an exhibit that they made. So they invited all the boys and their families to come. And they just spoke. And they spoke unbelievably. I can't, there's no way to even explain. When Yonah Brief passed away at his Shloshim, so one of the women that was in that house with Yoni, she spoke about this boy that didn't make it, trying to save her life. And there's something that's so, I want to use the word impressive, but that's not the right word. Humbling, beautiful, heartbreaking, soul-shattering of people who can take a step back and say, on the worst day of our lives, you boys were here and we have the ability to thank you. To me,
It's priceless.
priceless and not a given, I don't think.
Does Yoni ever talk about the machdal, of what happened on October 7th? Do they have any anger or blame, or do they ever talk about the issues that they didn't have enough giboy, that there wasn't enough army presence there? Is there any resentment?
I definitely don't think that I can speak to that.
Okay, so what about from your perspective? How did you rationalize what happened on that day?
No, there's no, I mean,
I think a lot of people, I don't think people, I'm not going to say a lot, everybody has a different way of thinking about it. But I think in the beginning, people were very angry. And I think now people are just trying to deal with the situation at hand.
yeah, I think that what you're saying is right. Like, I think that in my mental health world and how much emotion I have to give to what, I'm choosing to not put my emotion on how did the government fail, how did the army fail, which I believe that they did. And I believe that probably power needs to be shifted to other people. But my energy doesn't go to that. My energy goes to, is my kid okay? Are his friends okay? What happens next? He spent the past 10 months traveling and he just got back. And it's fascinating to watch our family reintegrate as a family of everybody. Because for so long, he's been, I say, like, one-dimensional. You know what I'm saying? Like, there are always Yoni stories and people are always asking about him. Also, from the 7th, the number of people that would call was unbelievable. Like, his madrich in Camp Stone in 2014 is calling me to be like, is he okay? Like some girl's mother from wherever who never met him but is davening for him. Or like people would send me, like, from LA, friends of ours, like their 10-year-old son, like, leading Tehillim in the class for Yoni. Like, oh, it's unbelievable. It's so beautiful. But he became a story. And then when he comes home and he's a person with a personality and has to integrate back and isn't this like Gibor Milchama, like he's just a person. Like at some point he's like, do you make dinner anymore? And I'm like, listen, we've got one kid at home. Like he finishes, basketball at 8, so we'll eat something at 8. He's like, I don't understand. And I'm like, no, be that Gibor Milchama again. But it's great, meaning, and I have the ability to say to him, like, even when he was gone, I think, like, I never once asked when he was coming home. Like, it was very, very important for me to not push him. Like, you'll come back when you're ready. And I just kept saying, like, wherever you are in this moment is exactly where you're meant to be. And that's how I feel, whatever that journey is to healing. And I think that that's probably the next set of questions, which is like, how do you heal? How do you heal as a nation who is such an angry, divided, and bitzedek? Like, everybody should be angry, but how does somebody heal after that? Or how do you heal as this kid or with his friends or in this bigger family or community? And I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, I mean, your community has sustained a lot of loss. Your son has sustained his friends being killed. How do you heal after that? Does the government offer therapy? I know my boys have issues with PTSD and stuff like that, and they have been getting help. But for someone who's had like a whole bunch of friends,
I think it's when you're ready. Look, I would say initially, before he finished the army and left to travel, there was this like frenetic energy of like, you can't be in the house, like you have to be at the hospital or visiting a friend or at rehab or at a family of somebody who's lost or at a cemetery and I just felt for him like, wow, that has to be so exhausting to not stop. And I never really understood the value of like a Thailand or in India. I'm not good at like stopping until I understood, oh, but there you can stop. And that was great. He actually was in Canada for a while, in Toronto.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
How does the community heal?
I wonder again if the stars hollowness of my community makes it. There was a day, wow, I forgot about this. There was a day that we were at a funeral. Yoni was still in, and we went to Ben's funeral. Also, as we walked out of Ben's funeral, there was an azakah. So just imagine everybody gets out of their car right out of the cemetery and is lying down on the ground. And we pull into Alon Shvut, and the street, there's like one main road. We're really, you know what I'm saying? We've got like one traffic circle. And the streets are lined with like people like waving flags. And I'm like, what's happening? What's going on? And it was for another funeral, for another kid. And I'm like, it doesn't end. I think Alon Shvut has been very good about recognizing and remembering and talking about them, talking about the boys a lot and giving them space. And I think that the community is good about respecting what families want to do. I think some families want to be private and some families want to, you know, talk about it more frequently or to have bigger events. I don't think anybody heals. What do you think?
I don't know. I really don't. I don't know how people heal. I think that people are waiting for the war to be over to actually start the process. I think everybody in this country is suffering from some kind of PTSD.
Yes.
And I think that community plays a major role, because without the support of other people, I don't think you can handle this on your own with the amount of suffering that we've all been through.
I always say, like, I'm pretty bad at the basic necessities in life of like, do you eat well? Do you exercise regularly? Do you sleep well? Do you sit in silence well? I do those pretty poorly. But the next level up, like, I'm killing the game. Do you know what I mean? Do I feel like I have great friendships that are meaningful and deep? I really do. Do I connect to people outside of my world every day? I do. Do I feel like there's creativity being used every day? I do. And so on that level, I feel like there's breathing space, there's air. You know, I think a lot of this is to search for air. Like, when do you take that breath of like, I can breathe for a minute? And so I'm very, very conscious and very mindful of like, are you in that moment right now? Can you take that moment right now? And so that I work hard at doing.
Yeah, I feel like the more I keep to a schedule, I think the less I have time to think about how I feel inside. I mean, now things are more stable, at least in my family. Both of my boys are out of Miluim temporarily. They're home, so it's like as long as they're not in, I'm half normal.
Air,
you know. But you strike me as a type of person that when you see a problem or you see an issue, you have an idea, you go for it. And so I don't know. I kind of, I'm not gonna say look to you for strength, but you seem like the type of person that you take the world by the balls and you make things happen.
I think that I would agree with you before the 7th. Like, I definitely was a hustle and a pivot. We would talk about that a lot. And I think after the 7th, there were these moments of like, I don't want it to be me. And the truth is, like, there was something hard about it because we were a tourist business. It was all about tourism. And we had marketed ourselves consciously as like, get to know us. Oh, we're Devorah and David. Like, get to know us, get to know our family. And so people felt very comfortable asking questions that I didn't want to answer and I didn't know how to answer. There's a story of, we had a group of a school in America came with their parents on some kind of support mission. And so we talked a little bit about Yael, what Yael was doing and what Yoni was doing. And also it feels sometimes like it's not my story. Who am I to tell it? How do I tell it? Like when you say to me, well, tell it as a mother, it feels like I can probably get 50% of the way, but there's more and it's theirs. And so it was always hard for me. And so we told a little bit of the story to these kids. And Yael and Yoni happened to walk in towards the end of the workshop. He had gotten out and surprised, and Yael picked him up. And I was like, oh no. And the kids said to Yoni, like, well, how many people have you killed? and said to Elle, like, what's the worst thing you saw blood-wise? And I'm like horrified. And Yoni's like, if I were a 15-year-old living in America, that's what I'd be asking also. But I had a hard time sort of being that person. Like I stopped social media. I just didn't really know what to say. Like, I don't know, do you want to see a pretzel? Do you want to look at a pretty focaccia? Like, I could show it to you, but really on the inside, what I want to say is I haven't slept in 5 days. And there are moments where I'm just waiting for the knock on the door. And it became really complicated for me to find the hustle and the pivot. Look, Dayna, my sister's husband, works, like his miluim is now already, he's higher up in miluim, but like knocking at the door. And I remember at some point calling her and saying, if somebody has to knock at my door, it better not be your husband. Like, he better not show up. And she's like, okay. Also, he would never show up. And also, they would never send somebody who knows somebody. Like,
were you worried?
Oh, yeah. Like, there was one night. Were you worried?
Yes. I put a chair by my front door. I was really out of control. I have to tell you what I did. I was really out of control. First of all, I'm a single parent. I don't have a husband to bounce things off of. So I was really like dealing with things on my own. And my boys are like, they're my life, you know? And I was so worried about them. I couldn't think about anything else. I put a chair by my door and I'm just waiting for them to come home irrationally. I'm just waiting for them to knock on the door. I actually dealt with it by cooking a lot. You know, I made their favorite foods and I kept cooking and freezing because I have a little bit of an ADHD problem. So it's hard for me to even follow a recipe, but it really occupied my mind because I really had to focus. And so I was cooking and freezing and then sitting by the door and waiting for them. But what was I saying?
The chair by the door.
The chair by the door. Yeah. Listen, there were so many boys in Modi'in that were also killed and hurt. And I was waiting for my number to be up.
Yeah. I had one night where we knew that something had happened and we knew that it was bad when they were in Aza and we weren't sure what. And David, I feel like, is like Yonah, like in the Megillah, like just has to go to sleep. Like he can't. And I'm just awake and I'm sitting downstairs. And I hear, it must be like 2 a.m, and I hear a car pass by with like that, sort of that hum of like what a police car sounds like a little bit of voice. And I'm like, And I hear it go by and I get up and I open the door and I walk outside and I'm like, there's no way I'm letting them knock on my door. You want to tell me something? Just tell me here. Don't come near my house. And that was it. And I stood outside. And still, I'm like, I don't know why. Like, why aren't we thinking about Toronto or my main cabin? But like, no, still. But this image of me just standing outside waiting.
Being a mother in this country is so difficult. Being a parent in this country is so difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, it comes from all angles. So like my best friends, like we sat down, I remember, and we were like, okay, if one of us gets the call, what are each of us doing?
Really?
And early on, I remember going to the Meshek, right? We have this like small space in Rosh Hashanah. And I remember we went to the Meshek and it was 5 of us and we took coffee and we just sat and we cried. You can't cry in front of your other kids. You don't know what, you just can't. Like, here's where you can do it. And
you have other children at home also. So you have to like put on some kind of did you feel like you had to put on some kind of game face?
Look, I think that I was probably absent in the first little while. I was definitely absent, you know? And I imagine most parents were. But I think that each of my kids have a relationship to the 7th and have a relationship with Yoni that has been deeply, deeply changed. They're not old enough. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, they're older. My youngest is 16, but Like, you don't have that language. We didn't have that language, 2 years ago. So it's discovering that language.
How is he now?
It's good.
Yeah?
Yeah, meaning I don't have an answer. How are your kids? Like, what's that answer? In this moment, he's good. I'm happy that he's there. It's complicated, And also, it's his to figure out, which is the last thing Devorah Levine Katz, circa October 6th, 2023, would ever say. Like, no, I would be the one that's like, okay, we're going to go here. We're going to go there. We're going to take you to this person. It's his. Like, as much as, like, I need to deal with it for me. And then he needs to deal with it for him. Yael needs to deal with it for her. The way that each of them has their own very unique way of dealing with it. That I can't pass judgment, Also, I love passing judgment. And it just has to be about them right now, which is really hard. I'm not good at it. And I'm used to being good at things. So it's very humbling to say, yeah, I'm not good. I'm not, meaning they're going to steer the ship and I'm going to sort of follow along and I'm going to, pray for the best outcome. I did say a lot of Tehillim. That felt like a throwback to Toronto in a big, deep way. A lot of Tehillim. Not why. It was good for me.
How have you changed?
Dayna. I think I'm broken. Like, I think that that's a thing that I am. But I also think that I'm not unique in being broken. Like, there's something that's almost calming in being able to be broken and not feeling like you have to hold it all together for everyone and you have to be everything to everyone. Like, no, I think I'm pretty broken. I think I have a tremendous amount of gratefulness oozing from my pores about what I have in my life in this moment, because I don't know what the next moment will be. I'm also wildly ADHD in like the best ways, even though I can't imagine my kids would probably qualify it as the best, but I really spent a lot of time like moving and shaking and doing and like going from holocrims to Papa Melech to curriculum to the Meshek and I think that even though it's really hard for me and it doesn't come naturally to me, like I think I'm able to say right now, I can't do stuff. And maybe that's the end of my very, very busy career. The next part is calmer and, a little bit more sedate. I don't know. Or maybe in a month or two, I'll be up and pivoting again. But no, I don't have it in me.
You don't think you'll ever be the same?
It makes it sound very dramatic, and it's not dramatic. Do you know what I mean? Like, a lot of times people will be like, oh, your Facebook, like, you're not fun anymore. Like, no, I am fun, sort of. I am. I just don't, that's not where I'm at right now. Like, where I'm at right now, even though this is probably our age of, like, self-care, all ages are self-care, but this is a little bit more of the kids are getting older and they're a little more out of the house. And, like, I'm still not breathing. And so I'm sort of waiting for breath to return. And I believe that it will, but I don't know that I'll be the same person. And I don't think that's bad. I don't mourn the loss of that person.
It's just reality. You're rolling with the punches.
Yeah. Also, I would say, like, I think we're doing well. Like, I do as moms. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think it's okay for the kids to know that we're teetering, sometimes more, sometimes less. Like, that's okay, I think. But I also think, like, the ground that I've created in the house, and I imagine that you've done the same, if only because I now know that you stock your freezer with all your kids' foods, is you just want to create a ground that's totally, like, the foundation is so sturdy so that they can come and they can drop whatever they need to drop onto that floor, and there's no avalanche and there's no earthquake. But, like, I just, like, if I have to be someone, I want to be someone that's creating that foundation, and I don't need to be anyone else.
For sure. I remember I took a picture once
It was a little bit later on in the war, and both of my boys were in Lebanon. When they came home very one day after another, and they had, I don't even know how many bags of laundry and dirty boots and whatever, and everything was like right when you walk in, the foyer was packed, and I took the picture, and I'm like, this is the best picture I've ever seen. I was so filled with joy. I'm like, this is just, it's surreal. The different emotions, the different appreciations that we have now, it kind of puts like a little bit of a dent into child rearing and where we're supposed to be at this point. Everything is like up in the air.
I sort of love it. Like, I love this idea of like you flip through the magazines or whatever websites are talking about like where you're supposed to be at. And you're like, dude, you got no idea what's going on. Like, it's totally separate from reality.
Yeah. Like one of my kids he's a slob. I mean, he never cleans up after himself. And I'm like, do I discipline him? Do I not discipline him? Like, should I tell him to put his cup away? I'm like, what are you, crazy? Don't tell. Like, but like.
No, but there is something. I think the first time that I got so annoyed when Yoni was home, I was like, oh my God, this is awesome. Like, this is so good that you're so crazy annoying. Like, that's awesome. But also, you're so annoying.
It's true. We have this like warped sense of reality of like what's good and what's not. But you're right. Every mess, I appreciate it, Like, I was waiting by the door for him. This is what I wanted,
Look, I don't think that they have that conversation with us.
No.
Do you feel that they do?
No.
Like, every once in a while, I sort of feel the need to say, I know you think like I'm a little bit nutty now, but like, and I am, but also because you've had this really intense experience and everybody else has had an intense experience in relation to that. And moms more. Do you know what I mean? Like, maybe and dads. I don't want to, maybe, but moms more, meaning that's how it feels. Like, it feels like there's this experience that we've had that we don't really necessarily talk about because it isn't as important as somebody that was on a front line or somebody. It's a different experience. But on the other hand, when you look at it through the lens of a mom, there's something that's when we were at Yona Brief's funeral, I was standing with Yael. Yoni was with his unit. And standing next to us were the two moms and two daughters that were, one mom and two of the girls that were in that mamad in Kfar Aza, and then the other mother who was in her own house.
Wow.
And it was the six of us standing together. And there were these moments of very, very deep sadness. And there were these moments of, those girls are 16 and they're beautiful. And you're the mom of this experience. And it was incredibly, incredibly powerful and heartbreaking. And also a little bit, we're standing, Yona Brief fought for hundreds of days. And it just all feels very, very small and very, very large at the same time.
Let's shift the gear a little bit and talk about Meshek 48. Okay. Let's talk about where the idea was born from and what you're up to with it now.
The idea was, we had done this Pat B'Melech thing, which was like, it became so big, we had started, really, David had built a bread oven in our backyard, as one often does. What would one expect?
Okay.
And what he would do is, he was teaching at the time, and Thursday night, he'd stay up all night baking bread, sourdough. He'd put it on a bread cart that I don't know when we purchased. It sort of showed up. And he'd roll it in front of our house with like a little bowl. And then my friends who were like, oh no, what's Devorah going through right now? They'd come and they'd like put 10 shekel in and take a bread that maybe was good, but could get better. And he did it for about a year. And at the end of the year, I was like, now I want lawn furniture. And so we found a place on Kibbutz and we moved this 9-ton brick oven there. And when we started Pat B'Melech, it was just bread. And I was like, you know what? you're good at teaching. So like if the bread doesn't sell, like maybe do workshops. And then it was like a good 1-2 punch, I thought. And the bread sold. And that first summer that we ran workshops, it's always hot in Israel, but it was a particularly hot summer. And I think people are a little bit over climbing Masada. No offense, Masada, you're awesome. But like people are just like, hey, really, they didn't even ask what we did. Do you have bathrooms and do you have air conditioning? That was the only question. And we did. And so that really just launched us. So we were like running workshops and then baking. And then we brought on more baking staff. And then we brought on more logistics staff. And then somebody invested and we took over an Efrod and we had a restaurant and a bakery and factory and events. It just sort of kept going. We invented these crackers by accident that weren't supposed to go anywhere, but are now everywhere. David was just reading Adina Sussman's latest cookbook. And he shows me a picture. He says, well, what do you see here? And like in the photo of, I don't know, she's making hummus, like there are crackers in the background.
Oh, wow. Wow.
But it became big and a lot. And we got through COVID and it felt like a lot. And so when we left, we sort of said, why don't we take the parts that we loved? Even though he loved baking, but at 4 a.m., like I just feel like when you hit 50, you gotta like
shift gears.
Shift. So we were like, why don't we David was getting into agriculture, regenerative agriculture. And why don't we do like a little bit of that, like a little bit of farming and do our workshops and have this coffee shop. And it felt small and it felt nice. It really did. And then post the 7th, I just think everything sort of shifted and it became like, when I talk about it now, I talk about it like a mikdash ma'at. Like I think it is like the holiest of places. I do, because the people that come in there, like it's unbelievable, especially those chayalim when they were there. They would do their briefings. They would take our space. They would bring in like top level intelligence people or journalists or whoever to talk. And I would just sit there like understanding half of it. But like
they would ask you in advance if they could use the space.
Yeah, they're so respectful. I kept saying they were like husbands without the emotional baggage. They'd be like, Devorah, you have a leak on your roof. And I'd be like, I know, the kibbutz won't help. And they're like, no worries. And they like parkour onto my roof and take videos and pictures. And I give it to the kibbutz and they're like, okay, fine, we'll fix it. They would ask all the time. And then at a certain point, for sure, they still have my keys. You know what I'm saying? But we would keep it open on Shabbat and we would keep it open. Sometimes their girlfriends would come and we'd schmooze with them. And like one of the top baristas, barmen in Cafe Kadosh, he was by us and he's like, you make bad coffee. And I'm like, no, I know. And so he would just like, he'd walk in his like flip flops and his uniform. And I'd be like, it's all yours, you know? And so he'd like make everybody coffee. Also like they would want things like macchiatos. And I'd be like, dude, you're in Rosh Hashanah. Like it's like hafuch. Like that's it. Like we don't even do
we have black milk. And hafuch. And that's
you know what I mean? And they just sort of like leveled up the joint. It just felt like a very holy space. And now I'm not really sure what we're doing. We still have workshops. Today I know like we've given the space away. Also, like now, I'm just really not good at business. Guys, listen, if I apply to your company, I'm not good. So like today, somebody is coming, they're doing something for Miluim wives. I don't know, like time meet pachot or something. They're like, but we have no budget. We have zero budget. I'm like, okay, like, so take it for free. You know what I mean? Like, I don't really care. I do care, but I don't really care. So it feels like there's this rhythm of the place where it's used for the community and it's used for us. And my son, who's in the army now, when him and his army buddies, who are literally the thuggiest of the thugs, like my heart just melts. They're just beautiful, wonderful thugs. They decided that they want to just do pizza and beer there on Fridays. And we're like, off you go. Have a great time. Do any of you know how to make pizza? No. Do we need to? No. Totally fine. Like 8:30 the first morning that they open, Dave and I are there at 8:30 in the morning. Dave's like, should I show someone how to make pizza? They're like, okay. And like people like their age demographic, like they just want to be together. So it's like 70 or 80 of them show up on a Friday and just hang out and smoke their cigarettes and drink their beers and eat their pizzas. And you're like, it's Gan Eden. Like that's literally my definition of Mikdash Ma'at. I love it. It should probably become something else at some point. And maybe it will. I don't know.
So how do you guys make an income?
It's a really, really great question. Listen, when we left Papa Melech, it took me like 3 months to like go to Rami Levy. First of all, because I hate grocery shopping and Dave's okay with it.
Me too.
But I just couldn't do it because we have like C- list celebrity status in like this 1 kilometer of space. Do you know what I mean? So we'd walk into Rami Levy and half the people thought we sold our company for like millions of dollars. And half the people thought we got kicked out in a terrible way. And the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. But like you walk into Rami Levy and people are like touching you and they're like, so you rolling in dough? And I'm like, nope, can't do it. I like literally walked right out, got in my car. I'm like, kids, you're not gonna be able to eat because I can't. Do you know what I mean? Right now, what we're doing, David is working for Patil Tchelet, you know, that tzitzit place.
Yes.
It's just on brand for him because it's like, everybody's wonderful. Like quirky people who love halacha, who have figured it out. So he's doing for them what he did for us, which is like build out a visitor center, bring in tourism, start workshops, start a store. He's really happy, which is great. And I'm sort of doing a little bit of Meshek stuff and a lot of like consulting. So right now I'm working for the Anu Museum. I'm consulting on one of their programs. That feels cool. Do you know what I mean? I did a stint at Matan doing some consulting with them. That felt okay. I like working with like young generation of kids who are up and coming, who want to do cool things. I don't charge them money. But I just sort of hang out with cool people and listen to what they're doing. I think for me, it's always about building community. So that's just what I'm doing.
Do you think you get that from your father?
Whew. I mean, it's like a complicated question, I think, that all fathers and daughters probably have. I think that my parents valued community very much, and they were community workers from the jump.
When you speak, I hear him.
Wow.
You know, it's like a familiar voice. It's
on the one
you're
hand,
obviously not the same.
Like
but
now I sort of wonder, like, do I pick up the phone and call like my therapist right now? Or do I call my
it's a
siblings
beautiful,
right now?
It's a beautiful thing.
It's interesting. I think also because I think we get to have that joy of memory of who people were in our childhoods. And that's who he was. And I think as they got older and my mother got, you know, is unwell, like that's complicated. Like I forget that there's that piece of him, which is like hard for me. You know, recently somebody posted on Facebook that they were looking for the book that he wrote. He must have written it when he was like in his early 30s. Okay.
Oh, wow.
And so Javi Wolf tags me and is like, Devorah, where's your dad's book? And I'm like, I forgot that he was that guy that wrote this book that was meaningful to people. So it's interesting that you ask those questions because I guess in the moment that I'm in, even when you started talking about like going to Shavuot and being there, and I'm like, oh, right, he's the one that started the learning. Also, what was the scandal? He wanted boys and girls to learn together, which is surprising for him, actually. He's pretty old school. But I remember them being like, no, they have to be separate. So I actually think that for a few years, like Dayna, like my sister and her friends learned boys and girls. in our house, in our basement or something, like Murano learning or something. But yeah, I do think that. Meaning, those are my parents. Those were the values that we had.
You know, one of the memories that I had of your father when I was thinking about our interview was in Moshava. And he was like the choir director at the time. And I remember I was bullied a lot in Moshava. I was a little, like, it was fun, but I remember there was this kufa where I was bullied, and they were doing a choir for the end of the year. It was sort of like a Kellerman's kind of thing from Dirty Dancing.
Love it. It probably literally was. Like in my dad's mind, it was that.
Yeah. And he convinced me to try out for the choir. I was so shy. I didn't want to do it. And he convinced me to do it. And he told me that I have a beautiful voice, and he actually gave me one of the lead singing roles. And it was because of him that I started to have bitachon, self-confidence. And I remembered that.
That is wild. First of all, like you don't like, I'll say two things to you. One, in my memory of you, what you just described is not how I saw you at all. Meaning not at all. Like, I'm even to hear that you were shy. I'm like, no, you were one of the cool kids. Like you ran with that crowd that was like so much cooler than like, oh, Devorah, she does B'nai Akiva. So it's so funny, like the way that you saw yourself and the way that sort of the world saw you. That's fascinating. That's Thing number one. And thing number two, which is, meaning go Gary, that's great that he did that. But like, you never realize how that one sentence, like when you truly see somebody and understand what they need, like what impact that has. So that's really amazing.
I know. It made a huge impression on me, and it really changed the trajectory of that summer for me.
Wow.
Your dad's is a great guy. I'm not going to say was in the past, but I mean, from what I remember.
Look, they were very involved. That was like part of what they did.
Yeah. And I think that you inherited that from him.
It's interesting because I don't think our homes are similar.
No, but when you said you did a lot of curriculum writing for Kat Mosheva, like you were always involved in youth and programs.
I think still am. Like, do you know what I mean? Like those are the parts that I enjoy. Like I enjoy sitting with the 27-year-old who's trying to do a Kickstarter so that he can do an album in memory of his cousin. Like that to me is like gold. I love it. Do you know what I mean? We adopted all these Shvatim of Bnei Akiva. We do value that.
And I think that, like getting back to the beginning of our talk, when I asked you how much do you think that the way that we were brought up affected us now. And I think that the education that you have, the community that you have, the matefet that you have, it really has a huge influence on your future, on how you raise your children, on the life that you create, and on the values that you have. And I think all of those different parts of it definitely have had an inspiration on what we're going through now.
I think that you're one of a few people that's in the unique position to say that to me. Do you know what I mean? Like somebody that didn't grow up with me, or somebody that didn't have the experiences in the same schools or camps or shuls, like they don't have that vision. So it's fascinating that like, I don't think I go that far back when I think about it. So it's awesome. No, not at all.
Really? You don't appreciate the education that you had?
I very, very much do, but I don't think that I make that jump. Like I don't make that connection.
I look at it as a source of strength. I think we were very lucky with the upbringing that we had.
I agree with that.
I think that after living my 52 years on this earth, I've met people who have had very bad upbringing, situations, and how it's definitely played an effect on their.
I think also
future.
on your podcast, like you talk to people who have these really intense experiences and talk about how they've come through it, or what they've learned, or how it's defined them. And I think maybe we sort of have the luxury of saying, oh, we didn't have that. We had other things. You know what I'm saying? Like it's not all sunshine and roses, but we ultimately came from a place that felt okay and good and safe.
And yet we still decided to leave and move here.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
I agree with you in the idea of like, I never saw my future in Toronto. I never saw that. And it was fine for me. I enjoyed it. I was very involved, but like, that wasn't what it was going to be about.
When I meet Israelis here, I'm very impressed with their resilience. But I think that the true heroes are the people that make Aliyah. The people who leave that really good life, like the one that we had, because I don't think it's like that anymore, and we sacrifice everything and we come here.
I found myself thinking a lot about, even with my kids and my kids' friends in the army, I found myself thinking a lot about these kids that come for their year in Israel, like 18 or 19. And there are these like yeshivot, and they're like, oh, just do machal, like stay and do the army. And those poor kids who like, there hasn't been war in so long. Okay, you're going to be a soldier the same way that you're like, there's not going to be war. Like, what were these poor kids expecting? And then all of a sudden they're knee deep in war in a language that they don't really speak, with parents halfway around the world who can't even get here. I think I identify with that because that's who we would have been. Like our kids have that grit of growing up here and knowing the language and having those experiences. I thought about those kids a lot. I wonder what it is for them.
I think everybody here has a very unique story, lone soldiers, people who've just recently made Aliyah, people whose kids that went into the army after the 7th, not fully trusting the government or the army itself. I think everybody here is in a very unique situation. Devorah, as I say in my Canadian accent, Devorah.
I'll take it out. I love it.
Devorah. I want to thank you so much for, first of all that you do for your community, for
Thanks.
Am Yisrael, and for people who like to eat and drink coffee.
I like them. I love them.
It's really, after I've read all the things that you've written and what you've been through personally with your family, you're really an inspiring person, even if you don't feel like you are.
I think I feel that everybody is.
Okay.
No, I really do. I do.
We're going through a very, very important time in history right now, and I think that the way that we handle the situation now has a big effect on our future. And I think that all of us are trying to be as strong as we can, to get through this in the best way possible.
I would say that I find it pretty amazing that while you're going through what you're going through, you can sort of take a zoom out approach and say, oh, let me share it with others. And so to me, the function of the podcast is to say, oh, let me give people a window into an experience that maybe they haven't, can't articulate, or maybe they aren't having. And I think that the ability to do that in a moment like this is pretty impressive. Don't edit that out.
Like I said, you're really the epitome of what I'm trying to do here. And I think that you're a really bright light, even if you don't feel like it. And I think that you're really inspirational. So
Thanks.
I want to thank you for coming.
This was great. Thanks.
And I wish you a lot of hatzlacha and light in your family and your community.
To us all.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Dayna.
Yeah. Thank you for watching, listening.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of The Dayna Show. If you like what you heard, you can subscribe to the podcast, like and share with your friends on social media, and rate us 5 stars. Don't forget to tune in next week, and we'll see you then.